Alright, so now that we have our lighting somewhat situated, we look at it, we're about here-ish. I did go through and also put the lights on their own layer just as another bonus feature. The lights have this color associated with them, but obviously it doesn't affect them out here. So just be aware that those won't have any kind of shading by picking a color. Okay, I'm just going to check my outliner just to make sure I'm still staying organized. Gillette can, sign, shaving cream, yes, yes. My lights are there, good. At one point I named this. This is going to be my fill light. Good. Alright, so that's good. And I have this one I angled up, a little bit down. If I hit W on this, obviously I can move it and I can rotate it and whatever, but if I hit T on the keyboard, I get two manipulators. I'll do it to this one because I haven't touched this one yet. You see how I get two manipulators? This guy is a pointer. So wherever he's pointing, that's where the light's going to face. So sometimes it's easier if I want to aim this at this thing and keep it there, that I just kind of move this right about there, and then I can move this up, I can move it over, I can do whatever, and it still stays pointed at it. Okay? So you can do that as well. Alright, so now that we have our lighting, I'm going to go and save this as. And we'll call this one Texturing. Okay. Now, I'm going to look at, here's an image of a Gillette can I found online. Obviously, the one I had, if you remember, was blue. We have a couple different materials that we want to deal with here. There's like this red plasticky cap. There's this white metal here. And then there's a label. The label is going to take the most amount of time. Okay, so we'll save that till the end. Also, we have this guy here, like that we should add some sort of texture to. This cream is going to get a color. The sign is going to get a color. The light bulbs are going to get a color. And these things are also going to get a color. Alright, so we're just going to start with whatever. Probably start with this cream and work our way around. Alright, so here's our shaving cream. I'm going to go to lighting and shading, assign new material. Now because we're dealing with the linear workflow, which is how we set up our physically accurate lighting and whatnot, oops, I'll go back to that. I want to use, for all of my materials, I want to use an MIA material X passes. It's very important that you use MIA material X passes and not the one right above it, MIA material X. Okay? So I'm going to click on that, but before I do, I'm going to left click and drag. Nope. There we go. I'm going to middle click and drag this up to my favorites. Okay? And all that's going to do is that now when I come here to lighting and shading, I go to assign existing, I'm sorry, not assign favorite material, it's going to be listed inside this box. So I don't have to constantly keep going back to assign new material. I can just go to that. Alright, so here it is. I may delete the history on this guy again. I did some changes to it. And this will be shaving cream white. And what color do I want to use? Basically we want to pick like a white color. Okay. If the color we choose is anywhere outside of the white spectrum, like for whatever reason I decided to use this funky color here for the shaving cream, we would have to run a correction on this color, which we'll see. Okay, but we're leaving this as white, so we'll just leave it as white. So diffuse color, make sure it's the diffuse color, not the reflection color, because the colors are all over the place. Let's see, the roughness I can pull up a little bit. It just kind of takes the edges of this, it just kind of softens it a little bit more. The reflectivity, obviously shaving cream is not too reflective, so I can pull this down maybe to about there. The glossiness, if we look at an image of shaving cream like this, you don't see really harsh, sharp specularity to it. Okay? If you look at this cap, you can see a hard specular. you can see a hard specular. Okay, this one doesn't have so much of a hard specular. So we can pull this glossiness down. That's just going to soften that entire look. That should be good. All right, so now let's just do a little preview. So we'll come to our render view. I'm going to do a snapshot this time because I only want to look at this. So I'm just going to draw a box around that shaving cream, hit the render preview button or render region button, and take a look at it. Okay, it's looking okay. I can probably lessen maybe the roughness on this. All right, maybe I want to pull the specularity up just a bit. Need to come down with that glossiness. It's coming out a little bit too harsh. Obviously, if it's wet, it's going to have a little bit different texture, but we want it to be soft. That's our goal. Okay, so for now, that looks okay. We can always brighten it up a little bit later, too. All right, so that's fine. So now we'll go back to this cap, assign favorite material now, and just go to MIA material X passes. Okay, this is going to be whatever color. This one obviously is red. The other image is red also. There's a blue, there's green. You can make up your own color. It doesn't matter. Okay, just pick something that's pleasing to the eye. Like I said before, if I pick solid red, solid green, solid blue, solid white, or solid black, I don't have to do this little fudging. Okay, but if I wanted to get something in the middle like this, I think that's a little bit more appealing. Then I do have to do this little trick. Okay, and I'm going to show you why I have to do it and what you're going to be looking for. So render view, snapshot, draw a box around the cap, and then render the region. And the only reason I'm doing that is just speed. Okay, so now if we look at this color and we look at that color, they kind of look the same, but this one actually looks a little bit washed out. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this map button. I'm going to go find a gamma, which is under utilities. So I type GA up here, click utilities, and go to gamma. I'm going to use 0.454 for my gamma here. And for that value, I'm going to pick that blue again. All right, now just so you can see the difference, I'm going to save this image and render it again. Okay, so there's the new one, there's the old one. So you can see how this color is a little bit more accurate here than it is there. It actually looks a little bit more accurate here, but it's definitely washed out. And one of the reasons that's happening is I think my lighting might just be a little bit too dim, and I'm going to have to brighten it up some. All right, so let me just go back to my lights and go to my portal light. And I'm just going to up this first one here to 7. I'll try it at 10. There we go. I think that's turning out a little bit better. Alright, so now if I go back to that gamma correct, I can see that this color is closer to that color now. Okay, so that's what we want. Alright, so now, oops, let me finish the cap. Let me finish the cap. Let's take a better look at it. Okay, so what we're seeing here, this bright area here where there's a line, kind of like a drop off, that's our ground plane. Okay, what we're seeing is a reflection of the ground with the light on it over here. Okay, so what I can do is what I'm going to do is just kind of spread this out a little bit. Okay, so instead of this being a harsh area, I'm just going to take the glossiness down a touch. And you can see how it softens it slightly. Okay, I'll save that image. Take the reflection up or down a little bit more and just see what that looks like. Okay, it's always good to save the image and then do a rendering, take a look at it, save the image, rendering, take a look at it. So you have something to compare it to, because sometimes your eye can kind of trick you. All right, I think I like it the new way better than the old way. So I'm going to stick with it right there. You will notice that on the cap of this, there's these weird facets. We'll fix those too. If I click off, I turn my wireframe off, you can see them right here. Okay, I fixed that by just clicking on this, holding on the spacebar, going to normals, and saying soften edge. And now that's nice and soft. I could also click on this and hit 3, and that would also smooth it out if that wasn't sufficient. Okay, I probably will do that anyway before I do my final render, just to get rid of this blockiness that's happening here. But I don't want to do it yet, because when I hit 3, it's going to take longer to render. Okay, we're just kind of eyeballing things right now. All right, so let's go down to the bottom here. And let's go to lighting and shading, assign favorite, Mia, metal ring, Mia. So the metal ring, because it's going to be white, we don't need a gamma. And I think it's probably good just kind of cranking up the reflectivity a little bit. I don't know if we really need to do too much work on this one since it's just a metal ring. Yeah, that'll be sufficient. Okay, we can adjust that later if we need to. Let's do the rope. And you'll see I'm kind of bouncing around. I'm trying to do all the easy things first, and then we'll do the harder things. Rope Mia. Okay, and then obviously I want the reflectivity down in this, glossiness down in this. And on this I'll probably add a little bit of a bump, so I'm going to go to bump. And I can do either an overall bump or a standard bump. There's two different ways to do bump, or two different slots for a reason we'll get into a little bit later. So I'm just going to add a standard bump to this. I don't need to do a gamma correct or anything fancy like that. But I'm just going to pick something like, let's try fractal. Okay, but we use, there's a 3D fractal which is down here. Now if I click on 2D textures, these are all the 2D ones. The 3D ones are a little bit easier to use. Okay, so I'm going to click on the solid fractal right there. The bump depth, I'm going to lower this to 0.1. That's just a random number I'm coming up with. Okay, then let me do a little preview. Okay, that's obviously too low. Let's put up to 0.5. All right, let's go to the solid fractal. I think it just might be too soft. And we'll take the frequency up some. And we'll take the ratio up some as well. That actually gives a little bit more grain to it. And I'm just playing with the settings, just trying to get something that looks kind of organic-y, like there's some sort of texture to it. You know, kind of like that. All right, so now I can go back to the bump and take it down a little bit. There we go. That's good. It just has some sort of other texture there. We're not going to get too terribly close to it. So let me save this. And let's see. I guess there's no really stopping it. Let's just get right into the label so we can get that. I'll go to assign favorite. I'll go to label, Mia. Let me just make sure I labeled this. Yes, I did. Okay. Label Mia, For this, we want to get basically a label for this. Okay, and we're going to use Photoshop to create a label. All right. So in order to do that, we have to basically set up some sort of thing on here that lets us know, how big should we build this thing. Okay. So just to give you an example, let's pretend that I had a picture of this one. So I'm just going to map it on here as a file. Okay, so there's the image. And then when I hit 6 on my keyboard, you can see that it obviously doesn't come in correctly. Okay? If you remember from the intro class when this happened, we had to do a projection on it. Alright, so we're actually going to be creating this image in Photoshop. So I'm going to right click on the word color and break the connection. I'm going to click on the map button again, and I'm going to connect in a ramp. Okay, now right now the ramp is going from red to green to blue vertically. But if you look at here, we don't have red really on here. All we have is this kind of this area to this area. All right, so this object is laid out in 3D a certain way, and it's also laid out in 2D a certain way to fit the texture. So if I go to Window UV Texture Editor, it's going to show me here's where this part of the can is. Okay, it's right here. It's not fitting this entire region. So what I want to do is I want to fit this so that it goes and fits the entire region. So I'm going to right click and go to UV, grab everything, go to Scale, and just use my middle mouse. I'm not going to try to click on here. I'm just going to use my middle mouse button to scale this up. And you'll see by scaling this up and moving it up that I can fit the red, the green, and the blue inside this window. Okay, now that's good. It kind of works, but it doesn't really give me a good idea as to whether this is uniform. Okay, even if I still brought that same image back in, obviously it's not going to fit because it's a different kind of image. So I'm going to right click on the color and break the connection again. And what you're going to do is connect a checkerboard. Okay, that should be the first thing we connect. And if you look at this checkerboard, you can see that the checkers, even though in the image are square, out here they're rectangular. So that's what we need to fix. So I'm going to click on the can. I have the UV texture editor open. I can right click and go to UV. I marquee the entire box. And now it's simply a matter of being in the scale tool and just adjusting this until we get something that looks squarish. Okay, it may not be 100% square, but we should be around 95% or so. And I could also go to Renderer and turn on my viewport. If your computer supports it, it'll give me a little bit nicer viewing instead of these fuzzy things. And it just crashed on me. So that we get to watch it again. Maya 2014. Alright, so now we're back with this. Alright, so let's again go back to this. Assign a Mia. And we'll go to the map button for color, and we'll pick checkerboard, and we've hit 6. Okay, so now this is the default checkerboard, how it's going to come on probably your can. Save again, and I'm going to try to go back to this renderer. It's worked before. No guarantees it's going to work again, but it's worked before. There we go. Alright, so now I go back to Window UV Texture Editor. I grab all the pieces. I scale. And you can see, obviously they're not square, they're very rectangle. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to scale. Now, obviously there's two ways to scale this. I can scale it in the red direction, which would make it square, or I can scale it vertically, and that would make it scale, or square. Okay, I want to keep my stuff inside this top right box. If I go to image dim, you can see here is this square, and then my image, my UVs are inside here. I want to make sure they stay inside here. Okay, so if I grab the red and did this, obviously it goes outside those boxes. So I'm going to keep it in that top area. Alright, so this is pretty close, like that. What I want to do too is I want to maximize my texture space. So I grab these again, use the middle mouse and scale, and just try to fit this as close as I can with leaving a little bit of margin. Okay, so I'm bringing this in. You can see how I've left a little bit of room on this side and a little bit of room on that side. So there we go. So now this thing fits perfectly. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to go into Photoshop. I need to create a texture that's based on this stuff. Okay, well, now that I know that this is perfectly lined up correctly, whatever, what I'm going to do is I need to export basically this image. This image shows us, here's where your object is. But one thing I don't know is, where's the seam? You see how there's a black box here and a white box there? Where is that happening? Probably on the back. All right, let's take a look and see. If I go to UV and I marquee it, there it is. So right here, this is where that division's happening. Right there and right there. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to spin this around until that's in the back. So maybe like that. Let's check it again. I can go to the front view just to verify this. It's pretty close. It has to come over a little bit more. There we go. So on my can, I had to rotate it about 72 degrees. Your can might be perfect. Okay. So now this seam right here is directly on this center line. That's what we want. We want it on the center line in the back. Okay, it'll make things a lot easier later. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is export this image so that I can use this in Photoshop as a template to create my texture. Okay, so I'm going to go to Polygons, UV Snapshot with this thing in object mode. So right click, object mode, clicky it, Polygons, UV Snapshot. This is going to go inside my work folder, inside my images. I'll call it Gillette. And as far as how big this should be, I'm going to make it 2048. Okay. We'll go into more about why we're picking this size, but 2048 is an okay size to start on. All right, so now we can go into Photoshop. Close that. And while we're waiting for Photoshop to open, I'm just going to count the edges. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say 4. 4 going this way. And maybe about 4 that way. Okay, this is the front of our can. So when I come into Photoshop, I'm going to open up that image. Work, images, Gillette. Okay, it's hard to see, so I'm going to control click my layer icon and then just use Alt backspace or Control backspace to just fill it with this foreground color of black. Okay, so now I can make a new layer, deselect with Control D, fill it with white. There we go. Now I can see where my UVs are. So now if I look at the middle of this, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm guessing that's about the center. So I'll just put a little marker there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, All right, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 this way, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 that way. Okay, so this essentially is going to be where I want to make my label. Okay, I can have stuff extend outside this area or that area, but these 4 here, I don't know what happened to the rest of this line. There it is. Those 4 here and 4 here are where my texture is going to be kind of visually seen. Okay, what happens a lot is that people build their label and it fits all the way around the back of the can. Obviously, that doesn't work. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the entire label making process with this because it's kind of like a Photoshop thing. So I'm just going to show some quick tips, quick things to get started, and then that's it. All right, first thing, kind of mark off where we're going to be labeling this. So right about there. All right, I don't really care anything else about the back of this. I can have some sort of design, but I don't want to go too crazy. If I had an ingredient list, I'd have a spot for the ingredients here, and I could have some other information right there or whatever. Nutritional information. All right, so I'm going to just create some layers and use some of my tools, like I'll use the pen tool. All right, so there's my path. Let's call this top. I'm going to control click it. Okay, give it a color. Let me go back to Maya real quick, just so I can get the color from this. So Photoshop likes RGB 0 to 255, so I'm going to click on that. And see I'm at 62, 134, 156. 62, 134, 156. There we go. So now that's that color. So now I can kind of tie that in with the rest of that stuff. So here's that little piece that I made there. I'll go underneath this. I'll eyedrop this color. And I need to eyedrop it. I don't know why I did that. But I'll pick a different color. And what I typically do is try to pick something by using math. So maybe I'll cut the 60 in half. 30. Or I'll leave that alone and I'll go up to or down to the brightness and maybe cut that in half. 30. Okay. Or maybe I'll subtract 50 or 60 from here. 134. Nope, I don't like that. Maybe I'll add 50 or 60. I think I like the idea of going into the black and just cutting this in half. And then coloring the rest of this that color. And maybe even doing a gradient. So I'll go to my new layer here. I'll go to my gradient. I'll add a gradient. Oops. Just going to do a black and white gradient. Like that. I'll change this mode to multiply. And you see how I get this dark to light area. I'll tone it down a little bit more. That looks good. This guy, maybe I'll do an effect on him. Bevel and emboss that. No, I don't like that. I'll do a stroke on it. There we go, that works. Okay, I'll grab my text tool. And there's several text tools here. Obviously, we want to use a horizontal and then just rotate. So we can get our Gillette facing up. Okay, use this as an idea of what it should look like. Looks like it's actually lowercase letters. I have under my text tools, I have small caps on, so I'll turn that off. I have trebuchet, which obviously this is not the same font that they're using. Okay, if I can just try to find something a bit close. Maybe because I double bolted it, doesn't really match. I'll just bolt it here. There we go. That doesn't look too bad. Okay. Pick a color. Now we're a fan of this color. So let's go up here and pick maybe that. A cooler blue. Hit Control T, rotate it around. Remember that region that we had. I'll just move this up so we can see it. There it is. And I can even throw in guides. That way I'm not having to see that thing. There we go. So I want to make sure this Gillette is visible. That's my goal with this. Okay, now it's your design. What do you want this can to look like? You want the Gillette down here. And you see foamy, lemon, lime, citron lime. There's a picture of the cream here. So if I want to grab a picture of the cream, I can grab the cream, a little trick, grab the two lights, just using shift. Go to my render view. I'm going to click the ground also. Under render, I can say render selected objects only, and then hit the render button. There we go. Let me get a little bit closer to it. There we go. So I can save that image. And I'll save it as an if, which is fine. And so now I can go in here and go to open. There's the cream image from my image folder. You can see that it comes in really dark because this is a linear image that's bringing in. This, remember, is we went to color management and we said we're going to give you a linear image and it's going to be sRGB. So in my save options, I can tell it to save a raw color managed image. So it's a lot easier to do that than to try to monkey around with it inside of Photoshop. Cream, raw color, yep. Yes. And then now we go back to Photoshop and we reopen it, and now it's adjusted. Okay. So now I can very quickly just go in with some of my selection tools or the paint or the pen tool. Okay, I like this one. It does a pretty good job of cutting it out. I'm going to just copy it, paste it. There we go. And do a little shadow underneath it. Obviously keep your Photoshop organized. I'm just kind of going a bit quick because I don't have time to show you every single step along the way. And I went a bit strong on that, so I can come back and soften it after. Sometimes it's just my workflow. There we go. And obviously adjust it, whatever. Maybe make this a little bit whiter, so I can go to this, go to down here, hold Alt, hue and saturation, use previous layer, and then just adjust the saturation on this, and then adjust the lightness. You can see how I can brighten it up. So basically it's losing that blue and getting more into the white realm. Okay. It looks a little choppy too, so maybe I'll control click this, add a little bit of a feather, maybe 2 pixels. I'll invert it, and then just delete a little bit. Okay, and if that's not good enough, I can always go back to the original, copy it correctly, All right. Oops. Make sure we're on the correct thing. There we go. Yeah, it doesn't look perfect, but for now it's sufficient. All right, so let's pretend that you spent a couple hours on this, okay? You can do a really quick slap together like this and then come back later and tweak this for days and days and days. So I'm going to turn off layer 0, which is my wireframe. I'm going to save as a TIFF image. No, sorry, not TIFF, an IF image. I'm going to put this inside source images because I'm going to use it as a texture. So this is going to be called Gillette label. I want this to be saved as a Maya. And of course I want to save this as also a PSD. So Gillette PSD. But this one's going to go inside my 2520 source folder. That way I have everything kind of separated. All right. So now back to Maya. I'm going to right click on the color, break the connection, click on the swatch, go to File, go to Folder, go to Gillette label, and there's my Gillette label. And you see how it lines up pretty much perfectly with the front of our can. Had we not done the little trick with this black box here, which somehow got moved, we wouldn't have been able to know where the front of the can is. Okay, obviously somewhere in the middle, but how far over here and over there do we go? All right, so there's our Gillette can. Lots of information you can add to this. You can add the caution, you can add the attention, you can add the little explosion thing right there. Come on. Here's a higher resolution image. So you can really get in there. Now you're creating your own texture. You're not grabbing one off the net and just dropping it on there. So pay attention to, all the things that you might want to include on here. Caution, container may explode if overheated. Net weight, dot, poids, net, 311, 11 ounce, attention, whatever. Okay. You can make up your own name if you want, but like I said before, keep it appropriate. You don't want to go bananas with, something inappropriate, waste all your time, stupid. All right, so that's the label. So go back and forth in Photoshop eventually and tweak it until it looks good. This was the end label I used a while ago when I first did this. So it's all stuff I created in Photoshop. That's it, and just drop it on there and it's good to go. Okay. All right, so now we're going to get to the sign. Now, my thought on the sign is that if you look at some reference, it's always good to look at reference. Kind of like this. They're usually on some sort of material. These are pretty much a, there you go, just a metally type of surface. These are going to be somewhat clear, but they're going to be lit up. Okay, I don't want them to be transparent because otherwise we're going to see the fakeness of it. So it's more like the light bulbs are already white and they're just kind of illuminating themselves. So these things are going to be silver, these things are going to be white, and then this texture underneath, and here it looks like it might be a piece of like burnt wood or something that they used. We're just going to use a regular piece of wood. So I'm going to go to CG Textures. And I am a member, I believe I am still. Success. I'm going to go find a wood texture. And I like to find planks of wood that are pretty thick. Okay, something like this doesn't work because this texture looped over that entire thing is just too much of the same thing over and over again. Something like this, I can use several planks on this and everything looks unique. So I can even do just bare planks. Look at that. Look at that. Some of these are too thin. Like obviously these ones are way too thin. I prefer stuff like this, but I think that's a bit too short. Something like that would probably work good. maybe even this. Let's grab this one. Okay, so I click on the image. There's a tiled image and there's this image. I'm going to grab this one. And in my case, I'm going to grab the large one. Okay, if you have certain accounts, you can get access to other ones. So I'm saving this image. And I'm going to go here and assign my Mia. Click on the map button for the color. Go to File. Go to Browse. Paste it. I just copied it to my clipboard. Okay, and there it sort of kind of is. Okay, you can see on the edges we're getting some streaking, definitely in some of these areas. So we just need to kind of fix this thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my lights, turn off my shaving cream, turn off the backdrop, turn off the Gillette can. Okay, I'm going to go to click on this and hit the up arrow a few times until I get back to my sign layer. And then I'm just going to reset this to 0. Because what I'm going to do to this, I want to do kind of like head on. So I'm going to grab the faces of this, shift click that. That should be good. I'm going to go to create UVs and do a planar mapping on this. Okay, our other one we were able to just kind of fudge what we already had. This one we're not going to be able to do it. So I'm going to project it from the front. And I'm pointing my Z direction. If I go to the move tool, you can see that the Z direction is the one that's facing the same direction as that. So I hit apply. And it looks like it's pretty good. If I go to the UV texture editor, here are those two pieces. Those are good. I'm just going to move them out of the way. Okay, and you'll see why in a few minutes. I'm going to grab this one, shift click that one. This is the same Z direction, but it's going vertical. Okay, so apply. And now you see in here how it's going vertical as it is out there. And what's happening is we're getting these like little slats. That doesn't make sense. You wouldn't make a board out of slats like that. So I'm going to go to the rotate. And now they're going the correct way. But I still want to move them out of the way. Okay, we'll move all these and rearrange them in a minute. So that's pretty good there. All right, now I have this side and that side, and this is going to be the X direction. Again, the X direction is facing that. Hit apply. You can see how on here it comes up with this big square. It doesn't really make sense why it's doing that, except the fact that it's just kind of fitting it, right? So I can hit undo. I can turn this on, hit apply. And then what that's going to do is fit it so it's nicer. All right, so it's not going to like squeeze this in. The other ones I didn't care for it, but this one it's like too much. Again, I need to rotate. And then again, I need to move it out. Okay, I'll do the top of this. Not that we'll really see the top too much, but let's set it up. Y direction, apply. This should be pretty good. Yep, just move it out of the way. Okay, and then I have these little pieces on the inside. Now, it seems like a lot of work, but once you've done it a few times, it's not going to be terribly a whole lot of work. There we go. And then, of course, the front. Oops, wrong direction, Z. There we go. Okay. All right, so cool. So there we go. Move this one out of the way as well. All right, so now if I go to object mode and I click on this, you can see over here, this is all those pieces. Okay. So if I right click and I go to UV, I can kind of manage these and kind of pull them into some sort of order. I'm just marking them and just trying to cluster them just so I can get a layout. Now some are on top of the other, especially if we did like the two sides at the same time. That's not going to matter. You're not even going to see it. And that is probably the back. Yep, that's the back. We don't even care about the back. Okay, So just like before, I want to fit everything inside of this box. Unlike before, though, I can have some overlap here. So I can take this board here and just fit this in. I'm going to scale everything down. Let me just scooch it down a tiny bit. There you go. That way I have a nice width. Okay. So now I'm just kind of fitting these things. And it works out good that they're just like nearly the right height. If I need to fudge something, I can just kind of scoot it down a little bit. In this case, it's not going to be too severe. We're not dealing with text or any perfect shapes like a circle or something that's perfectly square. We can just adjust things. Okay, so ideally I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have anything sticking sticking in the crack, because then it'll be pretty obvious. Okay, so here's my regular sign here, and I don't really care about this so much. I'm just going to scale it down and kind of move it up top here. There we go. Okay, so now if you look at the wood texture on this, it looks like it's a pretty nice texture. Before it was really grainy and stretched out. Now it looks pretty good. Okay, so let's come back in here, and I can delete history on this. Back to this. Reflectivity, let's put it down to 0.2, 0.1. Let's take the glossiness down to 0.65. These are just random numbers. 0.8 seemed too much. 0.6 seemed too little. 0.7 seemed too much also. So 0.65, let's just try that. Okay, it's a good starting point, and if we can always adjust it. Okay, now it's not really going to look like wood because it's going to look too soft and shiny, especially with how this looks. So I'm going to go to save this first, and then go to the hypershade. That's my button we created last time, hypershade. And then here's my wood material. So I click it, I click the double arrow, and now it's showing me, here's your Mia, here's your wood texture, or your wood material, here's your file, here's your texture, your placement of it. So I'm going to take this wood sign, and I'm going to find the bump, here it is, overall and standard. Now I'm going to middle mouse button drag file 2 onto the standard bump. And now you can see in here right away, because we're doing viewport 2.0, that we definitely have a bump. So let's lower this. 0.2. 0.2 should be sufficient. Okay. We'll see how that looks. All right. So now let's turn our lights back on. We'll turn our backdrop back on. I'm not going to turn everything else on yet because I still want to do the light bulbs too. And I might need to do some extra work on those. My lights are on. Why aren't I getting anything? Oh, under render, I have to make sure I uncheck render select object only. When we did the shaving cream, we needed to have that off. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Looks like a wood sign. Now we obviously want to put some text on here. This middle part's going to go away. I'm just going to quickly come into Photoshop. I'm going to make an image that's 2048, 2048. Because there's a lot of text, a lot of detail. And something about that resolution, about that proportion, and say Gillette. Be a man. Actually, I'll make the Gillette bigger. And then we'll make the other part smaller. Okay, so something like that. I can put. Oops. Actually, where's that piece of wood? I'm going to grab that wood texture. Something like that. Maybe something like that. That looks kind of neat. I'm also going to drop in just another layer. It's going a little slow because I got a high res texture. And basically what I want to do is I'm just going to fill this whole layer with black. I'm going to grab my area where I have my text. I'm going to feather this like crazy. And then delete. There we go. So this gives me kind of a vignette. And then I can just adjust my opacity. Kind of like that. Okay, no vignette, vignette. Looks nice. Alright, so now let's save this as an if. Gillette sign. Good. Now I'm going to create a new material for this. So I just grab that face. Lighting and shading. Assign favorite Mia. Go to file, go to folder. Gillette. There we go. And you can see I'm a little bit off. But if I go to my UV texture editor, and I can see it. It's right here. This and this and that and that. Okay, but if I couldn't see it, just so you can see it, if I grab this face and then I come in here and I say select, convert selection to UV, now I have the UVs. So now I can just nudge this down and maybe nudge it over slightly. There we go. I can even shrink it down, which is going to be confusing to you. You shrink it down to make it bigger. Gillette, be a man. There we go. Maybe I'll take the wood. Add a little bit more contrast to it. Thinking. Yes. Okay. I'm just going to reload this. Okay. Changed, I guess. Alright, so there's our sign. Cool. Gillette, be a man. So that's good. So let's see how it looks. Now I have to adjust my Gillette sign label. Let's take the reflectivity down to 0.2. Glossiness to 0.65. Save it, render it. I'll plug my battery in. Alright, so now we have our sign there. It looks pretty cool. Our lights don't work yet, so we'll fix those too. Alright, let's do the metal rings first. So here's the trick to doing this. I'm going to switch to the top view. We need to isolate these metal rings. So if you want to go through and click each one individually, I'm going to do it in about 2 seconds. Okay, one mark key to grab the sign, the lights, and the light bulbs. I hold the control key because it's my deselector. I mark key the light bulbs to deselect those. I hold the control key still, mark key the sign to deselect that. So now I have just those rings selected. Wonderful. So now let's go to lighting and shading. Mia. light bulb base. And I'm just going to switch this preset to chrome. Okay, I'm actually going to give it the glossiness is set to 0.5, which is fine. But I'm going to take my samples up to 16. And what that should give me is something that's just a little bit kind of like a fuzzy reflection. So let's render it and see. Alright, so there's our, this actually took a lot of time, 40 seconds for this to happen. So maybe I'll take this glossy samples down to 8. I'll take a maximum trace depth to 2 also. Okay, these are just 2 things that are just going to help lower this thing. One thing I'm noticing too is if you look at this sign, you can see how harsh this is. No, especially a wood sign would never be that hard. So we're going to fix that too. Alright, so if I come back here to my wood sign, and I go to that overall bump and I click here, I can add what's called an MIA rounded corners. So I just search MIA, click mental ray, and there's the rounded corners. Okay, this is one way to do it. I pop in a radius, something like 0.1. Do a little preview. Alright, so you see it's broken up a little bit. I'm not sure if I totally like how this is turning out with that. It's kind of one of those things where you just kind of try it and see. Okay, I'm going to right click on overall bump and break it. What I can do without doing that is just grab it, go to edit mesh, throw a bevel on this whole thing. Okay, lower this to 0.01, maybe not that low, 0.05, that should be good. And I lost my texture, not a big deal. I just right click, assign favorite or existing material, wood sign. Come on. There we go. Right click on this face again, assign existing, Gillette sign label. Okay, there we go. So now this is going to be a little bit broken up like we wanted. Let me rotate down a little bit. Alright, so there it is. So now it's just broken up slightly, and that's all we really needed. It's not too harsh, it's just kind of like the right amount. We can always adjust it too. One thing to note is if I go into my bevel, I can adjust this all I want, 0.2, and that'll knock it down. Okay, that'll kind of open this up a little bit more. But if I start adding segments, sometimes my label will go away. I don't know where it's going to go if I hit 5. Okay, apparently not going to go away at all. Sometimes it will, okay? Just because I picked on face number 4, and by adding more divisions, I'm adding more faces. So just be aware of that. In this case, it's not too terrible to have to reassign that one if we needed to. There we go, and that even better. Okay, so that's good. So now let's work on the light bulb textures. Let's go to the top view, marquee all the light bulbs. There they are. And I'm going to go to assign favorite material, Mia. And I'm going to use, kind of set up some basic settings here. Just, I want to pick a color of this, obviously, and I'll need to use the gamma here, but we'll get to that in a second. Reflectivity I want to have up. I just want to see how this is going to look right now. So let me just see what this looks like as of this very second. Just adding a default material to it. Alright, so it doesn't look too bad. It looks like the lights are off, and that's essentially what I want it to look like. I'm going to pull up the whiteness a little bit more. Let me pull it up like that. And then we'll just do a little comparison chopping and just see what it looks like. I want it to be a little bit brighter. than it was, but I don't want it to look like it's on at all. Like, I think that's probably good. That's actually pretty perfect. I'm going to add a tiny bit more reflection, I think, maybe like 0.8. There's the before, the after. Okay, and then we'll do another before and after. Okay, so here's the after. There's the before. It's got a subtle thing, but it's there. Okay. Part of it is that we're reflecting on the top, we're reflecting black because in our scene here, that's all we have above us. Okay. So that's not a big deal. I'm liking the way that's turning out. Now to get these things to actually light up, if I come down here to advanced, there it is. There's this additional color. I crank this up, and then if we look at this, there, I stopped it there. Not that it would have taken too much longer, but now that it's done, you can see that these things are looking like they're lit up. With a little bit of an exception, is that it doesn't really look like it's illuminating the area around it. Okay, that's one of the things we want to make sure that we have, is it looks like it's illuminating that area. So under the render settings, under indirect lighting, there's final gather, and what that's going to do is take this into account, and it's going to actually push that lighting around. So for accuracy, I'm going to 50, point density 0.5, point interpolation 50. Okay, we'll talk about those numbers a little bit later. Okay, so now let me grab a little section. I'll do a little save, do a preview. All right, so now here we are. Now you can see this is definitely, the whole scene is a little bit lighter. I go back, I go forth. You can see that it's lighting up a little bit more around there. Not terribly a lot, but a little bit more. Okay. So one thing I need to do in here is I'm going to go to this additional color, and I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to add what's called a light shader, or a light surface. So I click on light, or I type light, I click on mental ray, add a light surface. Okay. So now here's the light surface. So if this is white, we're going to get this. Okay. A little bit brighter. But here's where we have some additional options, is that I have this final gather contribution, where basically I can push the brightness of this up. Okay. So if I save this again, I render it again, and when you do final gather, you're going to get like a bad pass and then a good pass. So you can see how it's brightening up a little bit more the area around it. Okay. So that's good there. If this intensity is set to 1, we actually lose all the values of our previous light. So I would usually take this intensity to 0.5. Okay. Otherwise, our entire light surface just gets washed out. Well, let's go to 0.8. Okay. So now what I want to do is some lights should be on, some lights should be off. We want to animate this thing like it's going in a circle. Okay, and I like clockwise, I don't like counterclockwise. There we go. So you'll see a bigger difference in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to animate the texture of this thing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is create a texture for this. So under this color here, just let's do a test. If I take this to black, you can see I pretty much get what we were getting back here. Okay, same light bulbs, there they are. Okay, and I'll even test that by just pulling that off and pulling that off. So basically this is not doing anything. That's what that just did. I just want to verify that I'm not getting anything, and I'm not. You can see no result. So just me taking this color from black to white took care of that. Okay, so I'm going to create a texture for this, and it's going to be a ramp. And this ramp is going to be no interpolation. It's going to be black here, white there. Okay, so we don't need to see what this is going to look like right now, but essentially what I want to do is when the lights are on, I want them in this area of the texture. When the lights are off, I want them in this area of the texture. So now how do we do that? It's a bit tricky, but not really. So what I'm going to do is grab every other light bulb. And I don't really have a trick for this, except for good old-fashioned shift clicking. If you did this correctly, you should have all of your light bulbs set up correctly. There we go. Okay, so we have an even amount. So I'm going to go here and go to Create UVs, go to Planar Mapping, and I'm going to do a Z direction project. Okay, so now if I come into my UV texture editor, you can see here's all the UVs for that. So I'm just going to shrink these down. Alright, it's not going to go. Fine. I'll right click and go to UV and marquee them. You can see I marqueed all those. And I'm just going to scale them down and shove them into the bottom of this. Okay, if I go up to textures and I go to ramp, that's what I want to see. Hit 6. Let me save. Alright, it doesn't like something I just did. Alright, there we go. Oh, didn't like something. UV texture editor. Alright, well, if you remember from that ramp image, white was on one side, black was on the other. So that's all you have to remember. Alright, so these ones are on the bottom. So now I'm going to grab the other ones. And you can see what those UVs look like as I'm kind of shift clicking these, is that they don't look like they're nice at all. And because, if you remember, these started off as cubes, so their UVs are going to be different than a sphere, than a cylinder, than whatever. Everyone gets their own default setup. There we go. Okay. So now, do another project. Create UVs. Planar map. There they are. Right click UV. Grab them all. Scale them. And put them in the top side. Alright. So now we have some with UVs on top. Some with UVs on the bottom. So I'm going to save. We'll render. And there's our sign. So now you see we have the white ones that look like they're lit up. We have the gray ones that are not lit up. And everything's cool. It still needs more work. We still need some adjustment. But this is the essence of what we're doing. Okay, this is the starting point of what we need to do. We could add a little light on each one of these and set those up too. But I just don't want to get that deep into this specific piece. I'd rather go over some very broad stuff and then work our way down into other areas. Alright, so that's it. Okay, as far as the initial setup. Now how do we get them to move? Well, if I come to that ramp right here, and this is a light bulb ramp, I click on this arrow, it's going to take me to the place 2D texture. So this is going to be easier to see if I do a little tear off. So I'm going to hit back. Here's the ramp. I'm going to say copy tab. So here's my tab. I'm going to go back to the place 2D texture. If I go to offset in the V direction, which is here, and I say 0.5, you can see that up here we've offset. And if I go to 1, we've offset back. Okay, so what I can have this thing do is just animate this offsetting. But I don't want it to just happen gradually. I want it to just happen all at once. Okay, so this might be where a little playing around comes in, but I'm going to assume that every 5 frames, maybe every 3 frames, I want a new light to be lit up. Okay, so I want it to look like it's going around. Every 3 frames we should change. So what I'm going to do is go to frame 1, keyframe this, so I right click and say set key, and this is the right one, this is the V, because this is the V ramp. I'm going to go up to 3, or 4, that'd be every 3 frames. Set this to 0.5, right click, set a key. And let's leave it there. Okay. So now I'm going to come back to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Oops. I hit F to frame, but it didn't frame anything because I don't have this selected. So I'm going to say Select, Offset, hit F. And now you see this is a gradual change to 0.5. It's going from 0 to 0.5. I don't want to do that. I want to use this, which is stepped. So I marquee this, I click stepped. So now what's going to happen is it's going to be at 0, 0, 0 for a while, and then jump to 0.5. Okay? So now I need this basically to loop. So if I go to View Infinity, I can see this little dotted line here is what it's going to do after it's there. So if I grab this again, I go to Curves, Post Infinity, and I say Oscillate. Okay, it'll do that. That's not what I want. Curves, Post Infinity, Cycle. No. Curves, Post Infinity, Cycle with Offset. There we go. That's what I want. So it's going to go from 0 to 0.5 to 1 to 1.5. Oops. Yeah, and then 1.5 to 2, 2.5 to whatever. Okay, so now we basically set that whole thing up. Now just so we can kind of see how fast this is going to go, I'm just going to create a sphere. And I'm going to go to my hypershade. And I'm going to create a surface shader. Okay, so I just clicked on Create Surface Shader. I'm going to go to my textures. There's that light bulb ramp. I'm just going to middle drag it onto Out Color. And then I'm going to middle drag my surface shader onto my sphere. And now if I rewind it, I hit play, that's how often it's going to switch. Okay? So that way I can see how quickly it's going to go. Okay, and that doesn't look too bad. That looks actually pretty fine. Alright, so there we go. That's it. That's all we had to do. So now let's grab this stuff. Let's just delete the history just to make sure. Okay, I'm going to hit the up arrow, rotate this back to negative 30 degrees. Pop this other stuff back in. Now I have one more thing I have to texture, which is this background. Okay, so I'm going to assign Mia. I'm going to call this backdrop Mia. I'm going to give this a ramp. I want to have some sort of coloring to it. Now I can't just throw a ramp on this because this is basically controlling the color of that ramp. I have to drop a gamma on it first. So gamma, utilities, there's the gamma, 0.454. Under value, I'm going to click on here and then click the ramp. There it is. And you see how it goes from blue to green. All right. Now remember, it didn't go to red. Okay, red's not in the spectrum. All right. I don't really need it there, but I want it there. Okay, just because I don't have it, I want it. I'm like a kid. So I'm going to go to Create UVs, Planar Map. I'm going to pick the Y direction or the Z direction because both are kind of facing, one's facing the green wall, one's facing the blue wall. Okay, so it gives me this. So I'm going to find the little T. Here's the T. I click it. I click the circle. And I click and drag on this red. Make sure you click and drag on the red. And then I can grab the green scaler and just scale this in. Okay, now I'm still not getting the red. So now that makes me kind of suspicious that something else is going on. Let me check my UVs. We're good. It's just displaying weird. If I were to render this, I'll just render a section over here. Oops. I guess I have to render a section over here. And I should get the full spectrum of blue, green, and red. Okay, the red's closer to that side, but I still get it. Okay. Alright, so that's good. So now we see this. So now I can just give this some lighter colors. Switch us back to HSV. Something like that. And I think I want to go with maybe a goldy color up here. Just something to kind of complement the blue. I could even eyedrop the blue cap and then slide this over to that color. So I'm going to save again. I'm going to try to go to this viewport and see if it doesn't freak out. Hopefully it won't. Alright, it doesn't like my viewport for whatever reason, so just switch it back to default. Alright, so there we go, we're good. Let me save this as texturing 0002. And I'm going to go to my render view and we'll just do a render setting rendering of this. Let me scoot this over a little bit. There we go. So we'll do a full-blown rendering of this whole frame, and I'll be back. Alright, so there's our first frame. I tweaked the colors a little bit because they were a little bit too drastic. Here's our first frame. You see it's at about 2 minutes for this frame, and we're still at a pretty low res. You can see that I have some grain happening in this cap here. I have some grain happening here, some grain happening here and here. All those things have to be gone and go away. Okay. Also, my staging for this needs a little bit of work. My label obviously needs to be finished. But for now, this is a good to go. Obviously, you want to be having a nice label before you start the next lecture. You want to make sure this stuff is good and set up and it works. You know, you could just advance 3 or 4 frames and then do a little test to make sure that the light bulbs have updated. Make sure your cream looks good, make sure the can looks good, make sure the backdrop looks good, make sure this looks good. The next step of this is going to be rendering it out. So we want to make sure that this is, everything is done up to that point. Okay, so there's no fooling around after this point. It's literally getting it out and getting it wrapped up, setting up the camera and whatnot. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop it now. You have plenty of stuff to work on. You have some sign here, whatever you want to put. Don't put the same thing I did. Figure something else out. Look up some stuff, whatever. Make sure your label is nice, pleasant looking. You know, even if you copied something that they did, that's fine. But there's obviously different ways you can kind of simulate that Gillette look to it. And this is actually another student's. Very cool. So you get an idea of what someone else did with theirs. There's the razor. Here is this, helping maintain mustaches since 1901. Very clever. Okay, there's a barber's pole here. Alright, so you can actually probably pop on Vimeo and take a look at that if you wanted. Alright, so that's it. So next time, rendering.